So welcome to this session, everyone. My name is Sarah Hopkins, and I'm the lead coordinator for the UAE branch of ELINET. So just before David and Nizar present their book, which is the focus of today's session, I just want to tell you a little about the UAE branch of ELINET, in case you're interested in joining. So we have around 15 coordinators at the moment, and we also have members. But if you're interested in joining this branch, then you can go to the website. I'll put the link in the chat, but you can also see it on my screen here at the bottom. And on the website, you can get information about the group. There's some information about EMI and global Englishes in the UAE context. And there's also a 5-minute video presentation and fact file on the UAE. There's information about how to become a member, and also there's information about upcoming events in the UAE and a reading list as well. And you can see some pictures here of recent books that members and coordinators of the UAE branch have published recently. And David and Nizar's book is here on the bottom row. So thank you, and I'll pass over to Nadia to introduce David and Nizar.
So good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome from my side as well, from ELINET. So we're very excited about this afternoon. This will be a different form of reading group for us. Normally, we just have a discussion, but today we are joined by the authors, the editors and some of the authors and contributors who will be presenting their book to us. So this is more a book presentation, and at the end we'll take some questions, and the authors will engage with you as well. So I'd like to welcome all of the contributors that are here, and I don't want to name them in case I miss someone because I've let in so many people right now, but for the moment I'm going to say welcome to David and Nizar, and they, I think, will be introducing the rest of the group to you as they go along. So very welcome, and thank you so much for joining us. So David, I'm actually just going to give over to you, and you can share your screen.
Great. Okay, thank you. So yes, so I'm David Palfreyman. I'm currently a professor in the College of Education at UAE University, and we're going to talk about the book which I co-edited with Dr. Nizar Habash, who you can see in one of the images there, and you'll be hearing from him in a few minutes. So I will share my screen. And I will start this presentation. It's possible that when I start this, I won't be able to see the chat and things like that. So if anybody is saying in the chat, your sound is turned off or anything like that, then please somebody let me know. So let's start this up. Okay. So we're going to be talking about this book, which was out just over a year ago, called Bilingual Writers and Corpus Analysis. So I'm going to talk, it's based on a language corpus, so I'm going to talk a bit about that to start with, and then I'm going to introduce some of the contributors to the book who are going to tell us about their parts of the book. So I'll start off with some background. Some of this may be familiar to some of you, but I'll just fill it in so that we're all on the same page. So what is a corpus, and what is it useful for? So a corpus, the definition we're using is this here on the left. So a large, principled, digitized collection of natural representative texts. So a corpus is a collection of texts, but it's not just a random collection of texts. It is representative of something. We'll come back in a minute to what that might be, but it might be representative of a particular genre. I'll just let Lourdes in. She seems to be coming in. So it's a large collection of text. Now, why do we want to have a large collection of digital text on a particular theme? So the idea is that this can be used for various kinds of linguistic research. So a corpus is a research resource. So it's like a very large data set, which can be used for all different kinds of studies of language. So, for example, if you are interested in the word well, then you might think about, you might think, sentences like, she plays the guitar very well, for example, as an adverb like that. But if you have a large corpus, then you can search the corpus. So that's basically how corpus research works, by searching this large collection. And here you see some selected examples, natural examples of how the word well is used. And you'll see that a lot of them are not like she plays the guitar very well, but they're expressions like as well as, which comes up several times down there. And things like well earned, well placed, well worth, or may well. Okay, so so by looking through a large collection of text, you can find real examples of how language is used. So that's the purpose of a corpus in linguistic research nowadays. In order to be able to do this, it needs to be a large collection of text. So, for example, ChatGPT, for example, is based on a corpus of billions of words. Other corpora are, for specific purposes, are maybe a few thousand words. So they vary in size, but it's larger than just a data set. It's as large as you can get, really. Principled, so it's organized according to certain principles. It's digital nowadays, so it's always an electronic corpus. Natural texts. Okay, so they are not kind of specially written for the corpus. They are written for some other purpose, and then they're collected into the corpus. Now, the text that you have in a corpus will typically have metadata, which gives you more information about the texts. So, for example, if you have a corpus of newspaper texts, then maybe each text would be tagged with the date when it was published. So you will be able to look at, if you wanted, you could search through texts more than 10 years old, texts from last year, to compare different times. So metadata is data about the texts that you have. And annotation is added information about parts of the text, typically words in the text. So, for example, well, the word well, it can be a noun, like a wishing well, or a well for getting water from the ground. But if you're interested in well as an adverb, then if the corpus is annotated so that every word is labeled with its part of speech, for example, then you'll be able to search for well as an adverb. So it gives you a lot more possibility for searching. Okay, so let's come back to this idea of representative. So a corpus represents, here we go. The corpus represents, well, traditionally the first kind of corpus would be a literary corpus. For example, the complete works of Shakespeare would be a collection of all the plays and poems written by Shakespeare, for example, or some other writer. So this is a case of a writer corpus, what I'll call a writer corpus, because it represents the writing of particular people or a particular person in traditionally in that case. Later, electronic corpora, the most common sort that you'll find is a genre corpus, what I'll call a genre corpus, or a discourse community corpus. Remember, corpora is the plural of corpus. So a genre or discourse community corpus will represent a particular So it could be, for example, a corpus of academic English. So that would be a collection representing academic English. So that's a genre corpus. Or a larger one like the British National Corpus is it's a very large collection of text from newspapers, from conversations, which represents British usage. Now, so that second type is the most common type of corpus that you'll find. Recently, well, in the last couple of decades, there have been learner corpora prepared. Now, these are for educational purposes, really, or educational researchers. So this is a corpus which is meant to represent learners using, for example, English. It can be different languages. But, for example, there's the Cambridge Learner Corpus, which includes essays written by students all over the world for the different levels of the Cambridge exams, like First Certificate, PET and CET, and Proficiency. So this is a very large collection of learners writing. Of course, lots of errors, lots of mistakes in them. And the idea of a learner corpus is that it shows you how learners write English. And so you can search through it to identify errors, or you can search through to identify differences from kind of native speaker usage. Now, to know what is native speaker usage, you would often compare a learner corpus with a genre corpus or a discourse community corpus. So, for example, you could look at how the word well is used in the Cambridge Learner Corpus by learners writing in exam conditions, and then compare that with how it's used in the British National Corpus. So the British National Corpus would be called here a reference corpus to help you understand the patterns in the learning. Now, what there has not been until very recently is a corpus which will include writing by bilingual writers in both their languages. So typically a corpus is one language, sometimes two languages, but the two languages will be, for example, translations of each other. So they're not written by the same people as examples of their free writing. So we're going to be talking about a bilingual writer corpus, which we've prepared. So the idea is this is representative of a certain group of students writing in both their languages. And this is the first time that there has been a corpus like this. So we're going to be talking about Zeybuk, which is Arabic and English bilingual writers in it. There's one other one around which is called Multinco, which is based in Belgium and includes writing in German and Dutch and English, I think. So, basically the Zeybuk corpus, so it's Zayed Arabic English Bilingual Writer Corpus. And you can download it and find it at www.zeybuk.org. And basically it consists of a lot of texts like this one, these two here. So you can see here there's an English essay written by a student who is identified just by a number, 97236. And then here is an Arabic essay written by the same student, the same writer. Okay, so it's a large collection of both of those. So I'm going to hand over now to Nizar, who is the tech side of the project, and will be able to explain to you all about the design and the technical aspects of the corpus, preparing the corpus.
Great. Thank you, David. I'll actually share the screen from my side. I can navigate more easily, I think, directly.
Okay. Yep.
Perfect. You all see my screen?
Yes.
Yep.
Excellent. Okay. So I'll also say just a couple of words about myself. I'm Nizar Habash. I'm a professor of computer science at New York University, Abu Dhabi. By educational background, I am trained in linguistics and also in computer science. My PhD is in computer science in computational linguistics. I worked for years on machine translation and also on Arabic natural language processing. It's kind of more of my focus specialty for the last probably 20 years, sadly. Sounds like. David, I got to meet David, who reached out to work on this idea, and I'm very happy to have had this collaboration with him for the last, about 4 years, I think, almost, right? Since we started. I'll talk to you about what we did from a technical point of view, not to say that this is actually the work that I did. It's actually so many of the decisions and the work was actually in collaboration with David on these aspects. As David, thank you for introducing the concept of what a corpus is. Now we're going to dig a bit deeper. One of the things that are really important when we're working on any corpus is to ask what are the design decisions that go into the building of this artifact, the corpus. And Zaybak particularly is interesting because it has a cohort of students which actually controls for a bit of variability here. They're all similar in terms of age, background, the fact that, we actually look at the difference between them. They're very minimal because they're all, or mostly, vast majority are Emirati students who are bilingual, who speak both Arabic and English. And they were all, the data was collected in a very consistent way, which was through basically the task of prompting them in an early exam at Zaid University to determine their level of fluency in both Arabic and English. So that was a really, hats off to David for actually doing all the hard work of actually managing that kind of collection. But that's kind of where the data is coming from. Part of what we did here is to collect the data, process it in a consistent way, provide layers of annotations or metadata of features, about the writers, their background, etc., but then also about the kind of errors that we found in the text. We corrected all of the text, and we also provided detailed morphological annotations and also quality leveling, which I will talk about in a minute. All of the work of the annotation was done through professional annotators. We did not do any crowdsourcing. So this is kind of an investment in money to get better quality work and not worry about, noise that may come from it. And we also did inter-annotator agreement to check the quality. Naturally, with a project of this kind, working with students and students' data, we were very careful to, get consent from all the writers to use their data, and all of their personal information was redacted. And also because we're, linguists, sociolinguists, and NLP researchers interested in this, we make this data publicly available so that with very, very minimal restrictions so that people can add to it and build on it. And part of working with David's leadership actually on this effort was that he managed, I was very impressed with the ability to connect to a very large number of people who were all contributed and added layers of annotations beyond the ones that I worked on, and we will hear from some of them later. So as I said, the data came from Zaid University, from these 3 courses that are listed there for English and Arabic. The prompts were very restricted. So they were about social media, about the concept of tolerance, and about development. And you can see in Arabic and English what the exact prompt is. They're not 100% exactly translations of each other, but almost with the same intent, let's say, of prompting the writing of a paragraph or so of language, to reply to this prompt. The data, so I need to just move my Zoom. There we go. The data that was collected had all of the information that I started mentioning earlier, like an anonymous writer ID, the school type that they went to before they came to university, the language of the schooling, which we thought would be a really interesting factor to look at, their gender, where they resided, and then the topic, the class, and additional details also. And you see here on the side the statistics. So I'll just kind of highlight a few things. So in total we had, jumped ahead. In total we had almost 400 students and 600 texts. Female students were the vast majority. Almost 90% of all of the people who submitted were female, 10% were the men. My understanding is that these percentages are consistent with the percentages of the students at Zayed University in the UAE. We also had a lot more students contributing to English compared to Arabic. So almost half of the students who did contribute text in English contributed also in Arabic. And also the preferred topic was social media as opposed to tolerance and development. And maybe I don't know if that's connected to their age and the thing that they wanted to talk about their own personal experience in. But we see these patterns to be kind of consistent in between the two languages, that social media is about the same percentage in both cases. Now, one of the first annotations that were done, and I think we're going to hear more about it later, so I will leave the details of it to our colleague who will talk about it, was to annotate these paragraphs or the documents at the level using a CEFR, or the Common European Framework of Reference for Languages. CEFR, to my understanding, is designed to work on evaluating the level of proficiency in a foreign language. So using it for English on Arabic speakers makes sense. Using it for Arabic on Arabic speakers may make some of you wonder, why did you do that? I mean, of course, the issue is with Arabic is that Arabic is a diglossic language, meaning that you have a standard form of the language, and then you also have the dialectal form that is spoken at home. And the difference between them can be quite significant. So the experience of Arabs writing in standard Arabic, we're basically treating it as being not going to go all the way and say a foreign language, but let's say 1.5 of the way to be a second language. And, so more details will be discussed later to talk about how this was done. I'm just going to give you the results, basically, of what you did. So CFR has 6 levels that are A1, A2, B1, B2, C1, and C2. And when we did the annotations on these documents, we wanted to kind of be able to look at the differences between the performance on Arabic versus the performance on English. And you can see this here to the side, that basically in the intermediate level, with the B1, it's about the same between the Arabic and the English, but the performance on English is lower in general. So there's a lot more A2, for example, in English, about 1/4, versus in Arabic, only 3%. And you also have a higher upper intermediate, which is the B2 level, a lot more on Arabic compared to the English, right? There were some documents that were basically inaccessible. This is a very hard task, and the agreement between the different annotators, when we look at pairwise agreement, is in Arabic a fair agreement about kappa 0.36, and for English it was a slight agreement, 0.16. The interesting thing here, I tried being a computer scientist, I couldn't wrap my head around all these letters. I wanted to convert them to numbers so I can actually, say something about the numbers. And I converted them in this simple way, which is, I admit, is not fair, because the steps between A1 and A2 is not equal to the difference between, let's say, B2 and C1. I recognize that. But on average, I basically got that the differences for the same people, for the same students across different levels, kind of were about 0.9 in the annotation, were about 0.9 for the Arabic and 1.3 for the English. If we fuzzify the annotation, kind of say, well, accept one level above or one level below, so you're not confusing A2 with C1, the agreement is much higher, but that's almost obvious because we're working with a very small scale. Overall, the average was about 3.1, which is almost halfway through. The Arabic, as I mentioned earlier, was a bit better than the English. Now, when we dig deeper and look at the numbers of the students, using their features that we have, we get some really interesting insights. So this is a repetition of the number before. On average, it's 3.1. For Arabic, it's 3.5 to 2.9. Again, the scale here is going from 1 to 6. So that's kind of, think of this as basically the range that we're talking about. We notice a female versus male student effect, where the women were better than the men. I will leave that as is without commenting further on it. I'm sure we can have a lot of discussion about that. And we also noticed that what I thought was really interesting was the high school effect. So there is a common perception that if you go to an English school, you'll be better in English, which seems to be correct. But if you actually go to a school that is Arabic, you'd be much worse in English than you are in Arabic. And we see actually a slight difference in the effect here. So you see that, for example, if you go to the English school, your performance on the Arabic is 3.4 as opposed to 3.5. So you're still doing quite well, meaning going to an English school is not actually lowering your performance on Arabic, but your performance on English actually is dropped compared to your performance in English if you went to an Arabic school. This is an interesting asymmetry, would be probably interesting to talk about in the discussion later if you'd like. And then the difference between the government versus the private seems to be similar to the Arabic versus English, because in fact most of the private schooling is in English and most of the government schooling is in Arabic. So those two numbers actually are very similar in pattern, because in fact they're similar with the relationship between government and private in Arabic and English education. All right. Now, in terms of the text correction, we used pre-existing sets of guidelines, one from a project that I actually was the lead of a few years back called the QALB project, or the Qatar Arabic Language Bank project, for guidelines for Arabic spelling correction. And we also used a common set of guidelines that were used for a large corpus. I think this was the NUC corpus for spelling correction for English for non-native speakers of English. And we looked at the degree of agreement between the annotators who did this work, and we find that there's a very high degree of agreement basically between them. So the difference is, what we did here is we took some documents in duplicate, had two separate people do the annotation, and they're generally quite similar, and the differences are actually very minor and not that important. Okay, so what does that mean, like when we talk about these corrections? What we gave the annotators is the document, and we basically told them to go and fix whatever they see in the text, right? They didn't do a major rewrite. So in many cases, the choice of the word was kept the same as the choice that they want. But then if it's a spelling or a simple agreement, etc., we would limit it to those kind of corrections. For the Arabic speakers, it'll be very obvious that probably some of the highest errors are connected to the spelling of the Hamza in Arabic, which is kind of a major problem. Also the Ta marbuta, which is the feminine ending. So you can see here the raw version versus the English version, and other kinds of typos. The second number error, what I call the wa error, is about whether the conjunction should be attached or not. There are schools supposedly on this matter. I think the guidelines we followed is that the wa should always be attached and not be left floating. And that was almost, a quarter or almost a third of the errors in this case. In the English, you also find similar kind of errors that would be typical of, maybe, some foreign effects of the students bring things like capitalization, for example, the use of punctuation, and many other kinds of typos. So all of those details are basically presented in the book, and all of it can be recovered on your own. I mean, the data is available with all of the alignments as part of the package that we provide. So we would love to hear from other people who dig into it and see other patterns that perhaps we did not look at. Now here, when I just simply look at the numbers between the Arabic and the English in terms of the numbers of errors as a high-level summary. So the Arabic, as I mentioned earlier, the number of texts is smaller than the number of English. So there are 214 documents versus 388 documents. The total number of words for the Arabic is almost 33,000, whereas the English is almost 88,000. And you get a difference in the total number of words per text. So Arabic has about 156 words per text, versus the English is 226. We talk a bit later about that difference is not really as big as it really seems, because Arabic has a different orthographic rules for writing, where a lot of things are attached into what makes a word. So we define the word here as what we call white space separated word, meaning it's adjacent to a punctuation, or there is a white space, a bar that you would press between the words. Now, in the corrected versions, those numbers don't shift a lot. The Arabic drops because of all the words that were separated and then they were rejoined. That's kind of the biggest issue. The numbers of the exact matches, almost 70% in the Arabic and 80% in the English. So if I pick one number, I would say these are the numbers that tell us how correct the text is. The number for the Arabic is not surprising at all. In fact, in the Qalb project, whose guidelines we followed, the number was 70% on people writing in standard Arabic in news media, social media context. So this is not much different. The other numbers are about whether you're making an edit that's a change in the word, or you're deleting or inserting a word. Now, the next part of the annotation that we did is the morphological annotations. And for this, we basically followed a set of guidelines that are used for both Arabic and English that try to bring them together close as much as possible. By the way, I say this with a smile because David and I spent a lot of time arguing over decisions that would make things closer or more far away. And I'm like, oh, but Arabic thinks of it this way. And, anyways, there's a lot of interesting possible ways of interpreting the data that we would hope other people would look at and go take it beyond what we did. What we did is we used universal dependencies, which is a very large project that's, I think, it started about 10 years ago. They just celebrated 10 years old. This is from the major article from 2017. And so we followed the tokenization decisions that were made for it, the part of speech tagging decisions, and the lemmatization. I think I should have an example explaining what I mean by tokenization. I'm going to jump to that just for a second. Well, in English, tokenization is rather simple. Most of the words are already their same tokens. The few words that you would tokenize, so to speak, are things like, contractions like won't, can't, isn't, that are written as a single unit, but then you want to break it with the is, with the N apostrophe T as a separate token. In Arabic, 20% of the words are actually involve some form of other particles that are attached in the word. So you see this example. For example, this is the word وَسَيَكْتُبُونَهَا. I put it here in transliteration under it, in romanization. And it's really the wa, the sa, the yaktubun, and the ha, which means and, will, they write, and it. So, and they will write it is a single word, basically, the way it's seen when it's written on a page. So part of what we did as part of the morphological annotation is to actually tokenize all of these different forms, and then provide the needed details on them, the part of speech tag, the lemma, etc. So back to this little table, because I think my time is running out. The upper part is the same as the one that I showed a bit earlier. I'm just adding a bit more details here. So if you remember, I mentioned that, we do some form of, when we do the tokenization with the white space, we get an increase on all the fronts. But then when we do the tokenization in terms of the morphology, Arabic jumps by a huge number. So English goes from 251 words per document to 254. 3 per document, whereas Arabic jumps from 160 to 210. And in fact, we tried another thing, which is to separate the definite article. So, the L that appears on every other Arabic word, in the tokenization that's used in the universal dependencies, the L is kept as part of the word. It's considered basically a basic inflectional feature. It's a decision, you can go one way or the other, but it's kept together. When we separate it, the number jumps to 241, which I thought was an interesting insight. It still is a very interesting comparison. So now you have 254 words on the English, and 241 tokens that are, most of them are parallel to the English, like the future particle, the conjunction and, the pronoun it, etc. But of course, we have to be mindful that Arabic loves its definite article and uses it, so much to control for agreement and syntactic structure. So even there, the comparison is not perfect, right? Of course, English has all these ofs and apostrophe s's that Arabic doesn't need, because we have something called idafa construction, which allows you to create these constructions syntactically by aligning words with each other. All of this is really interesting space, really, to kind of explore and understand more. I think this is my last slide on this, which is just a summary to try to look at the degree of lexical similarity between the topics that the students wrote about. In this graph, I think this is like the top 100 most frequent lemmas. And a lemma here is basically, let's say, an abstraction. Think of it as the dictionary entry. So in the previous example, when I talked about وَسَيَكْتُبُونَهَا, the lemma is kataba, is the dictionary entry to write, effectively, not that they wrote, he wrote, I wrote, etc. The Arabic verbs go into hundreds and actually almost 1,000 forms, depending on how far you want to go when you start adding all of these particles. So here we see, of course, social media. Actually, in Arabic, tawasul and ijtima'i is the same as social media, because we knew from the beginning this was where 80% of the topics, the prompts that the students selected. And I'll stop here and I'll pass on the torch to my colleague, Salwa Mohammed.
Thank you, Nizar. Thank you, David. Okay, so I'll follow your slides, David, then. This chapter is about the application of the CFR, as Nizar said, the Common European Framework for Languages, to the assessment of L1 competence and plurilingual competence. Next slide, please. Okay. The aims of the study, this study aimed to rate learners' writing performance in both their L1 Arabic and L2 English against the CFR proficiency scale, which I will talk about later, and to also analyze the communicative adequacy of students' writing as per the written reports and essays. That's the name of the specific scale we followed, and as interpreted by the raters. Mentioning the raters, there were 3 raters, 3 of us, 2 females and 1 male raters. Next slide, please. To give you some background about the applications of the CFR, even though Nizar referred to that quickly, the CFR was published to cater for the teaching, learning, and assessment of foreign languages. So the focus is on L2 competence, specifically on individual languages, with the purpose of standardizing across languages. Plurilingual competence was a big thing about the CFR. It was one of its biggest aims. However, it wasn't developed enough in the CFR 2000 publication, but it was then reinstated in the companion volume published in 2018 and republished again in 2020. We referred actually to the 2018 companion volume scale. Next, please. So, if the CFR was actually meant for L2 learning, for language learning, why did we use it for measuring L2, L1 competence? And I'm trying here to make a case for Arabic. It is becoming known now that plurilingualism doesn't refer only to transferring between different languages. Plurilingualism exists even within one language, since every language has varieties, levels, and different genres. Arabic in particular, as Nizar said earlier, is a diglossic language. So there is colloquial Arabic, which refers to the different spoken varieties Arabs use. And there is modern standard Arabic, which is used for writing mainly, and also for speaking in very formal occasions or contexts. This, as we say, makes every Arabic native speaker a plurilingual or a bilingual by necessity. We have to note also that colloquial Arabic is an acquired language. It's acquired in natural contexts through the home and then society. Whereas modern standard Arabic is a taught language. It's taught formally at school. In this situation, Arabic L1 learning or modern standard Arabic learning has more in common with L2 learning than with the acquisition of colloquial Arabic. The education context is particularly complex since teaching materials and assessments are usually written in modern standard Arabic, but the medium of instruction is in colloquial Arabic. In other words, the teachers and the learners might read a text, whether in an Arabic language class or in history class or whatever. They will read a text in modern standard Arabic, but they discuss it in colloquial Arabic. Research also shows that analysis of Arabic native speakers' diagnostic performance shows results that are similar to the performance of bilingual speakers. This, as you can see, makes Arabic a perfect case for the study and application of the CFR, and I mean Arabic as an L1. Next slide, please. These were the research questions. To what extent is the CFR an effective tool for assessing L1 writing competence? To what extent is the CFR an effective tool for assessing plurilingual competence? And what emerging relationships can be established between L1 and L2 as seen in students' writing? Next, please. This is a screenshot from the scale that we used, and it is for written essay. Yeah, thank you. I will share some few findings here. I will focus on some qualitative results because Nizar has covered the quantitative results. So some of the interesting results we had is that Arabic L1 writing performance seemed to be for some students lower than their English L2 performance. For example, 24% of students who were rated at B2 level in English were rated at the lower B1 in Arabic. Also, 60% of students who were rated at the C1 level in English were rated at B2 or even at B1 in some cases in their L1 Arabic. This kind of answers question one about the suitability of the CFR for assessing L1 competence. So we can see that it works in this case. In terms of emerging relationships, we found mutual cross-linguistic influences between the different languages and varieties included. For example, there were influences or mixes between colloquial Arabic and modern standard Arabic, almost across all levels, although it decreased at C1 level. There was also evidence of influences from Arabic L1 on English L2, mainly on the sentence structure, on some expressions, as I might show some examples. There were also influences from English L2 on Arabic L1, especially in the use of loan words, specifically, or more so in the topic of social media, understandably. To show some examples, the first example shows the influence or some influence from Arabic. So the student is writing, in addition, social media affect our life rather than our lives, because that's how we say it in Arabic. In many cases, in many ways, one of them is that we waste a lot of time sitting on our laptops rather than sitting at or in front of, because in Arabic we use the equivalent on in that case. The second example shows influence from colloquial Arabic onto modern standard Arabic. So it says أصبحت مضيعة للوقت من كثرة تمضية الوقت فيها and من كثرة استخدامها. And this again is an expression used in colloquial Arabic rather than in modern standard Arabic. The last one here says في رأيي الآن الناس بدأوا يستخدمونها في أشياء ليس لها معنى ولا هدف لها ناحية الانستغرام وتويتر. It has some influence from colloquial Arabic saying this word ناحية, and the influence from English, the loan words, Instagram and Twitter. And interestingly, Instagram has the L, which is the definite article of Arabic attached to the English word. So as I was saying, next slide, please. As I was saying, it was possible to apply the CFR descriptors to Arabic L1, as we have seen. However, the CFR was not as efficient in assessing plurilingual competence. A main reason for that is that its descriptors are still confined to the monolingual view of learning. So they focus on competence of one language. And although in the new companion volumes of 2018 and 2020, there have been, or they have added plurilingual and pluricultural descriptors, but these descriptors are still kind of broad with focus on conceptual aims rather than on suitable assessment. However, this is understandable since it's difficult to find a tool that caters for every plurilingual situation. Every plurilingual situation will be different. Even in learning L1 or L2, every situation is different. So it will be actually difficult to find a tool to cater for example, examples like the ones I showed earlier with mix of colloquial and standard, with mix of two languages. So until this develops, or until further research is done to find solution or find an effective way of assessing this, the plurilingual, the CFR doesn't actually, or didn't actually help with the assessment of plurilingual competence. And I think I'm done like this. Thank you. You're muted, David.
Okay, right, yes. So I hope I'm on the right slide now. So thank you very much, Dr. Salwa. And now I'm going to hand over to Dr. Lourdes Ortega from Georgetown University, who is going to represent the authors of her chapter.
Thank you, David. Do you mind unsharing? And I will share my own PowerPoint for ease. Thank you. Thank you so much. Can everyone see it?
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much. So thank you very much for the invitation to present today. It's been super interesting already. And I am reporting on a chapter that I wrote with two doctoral students at the time, Rima El Abdali and Shira Wine. They're both now already assistant professors in the University of Tennessee, Kentucky. Rima is, and Shira is at Amherst College. And this was a collaboration between the three of us when David and Nizar contacted us and offered the possibility to use the corpus to study something of our own choice. Rima does second language acquisition like I do, but she also is a speaker of Arabic, and she has expertise in corpus linguistics. And Shira is a computational linguist with no Arabic and not so much interest in second language acquisition. So each of us, the three of us, brought different strengths to the chapter. So we decided to carry out a study taking advantage of the lingual quality of the corpus, so unique and so special and singular, by looking at an issue that has been known in child bilingual acquisition for 30 years now, but that is rarely considered in second language acquisition. And this is the fact that the vocabulary of a bilingual is by definition always larger than the vocabulary of a monolingual if we count either all concepts in the bilingual lexicon or all labels in the bilingual lexicon. But if we compare a bilingual lexicon to a monolingual lexicon and we only count the entries, concepts, or labels in one single language of the bilingual, then of course, we would always find that it's smaller, right? For language acquisition, the field, lexical diversity, lexical development is always really looked at as a one language only at a time, right? We only focus on the target language. And this results in a deficit view, and that is very difficult to overcome. So we decided to try to use the bilingual essays in the corpus to explore the possibility of measuring lexical diversity bilingually instead of monolingually. So adding up the two languages of the bilingual at once. So what that entailed was, first we had to do a first step was computationally very intensive. We used a language agnostic BERT sentence embeddings model, which is a vector-based approach to cross-lingual word embeddings. And our goal was to identify the conceptual overlap in English and Arabic in the two sets of essays written by the same writers. We focused only on noun, verb, and adjective overlap. This was, as I say, computationally very intensive, and Shira Wayne, who is the computational linguist, was the one guiding us through all of the work that was needed to get this done. And after that, the second step was devising 3 new lexical diversity measures that would capture the sum of the Arabic and the English within each writer. So in the end, we settled on 3 measures. One was the total vocabulary score, which was basically looking at all the different lemmas, the average of lemmas within each writer, summing up Arabic and English. So it's an inventory really of all the lemmas together. The conceptual vocabulary score was focusing on the concepts only. So what we did is subtract any doublets, meaning let's say a concept that appears in both essays by the same writer, both in English and in Arabic, with 2 labels that are basically a translation of each other. Those would be doublets. And so if we subtract the doublets from the rest of the lemmas, we get all the concepts, an inventory of the concepts. And then the bilingual vocabulary score was the opposite kind of thinking. How many of the concepts that appear in a same writer's 2 essays appear both in English and in Arabic. Therefore, we have the 2 lemmas or types that are translation equivalents of each other. And this was really very much, the thinking of these 3 measures really came a lot from bilingual child language acquisition and how they measure total vocabulary and total conceptual vocabulary. So once we had that done, we carried out analysis, but first it was very, very difficult to sample from the entire corpus. And this was like, it took us a long time to figure out what we wanted to do, what was the best in the design of the sampling. So we wanted same writer, same topic essay pairs. And in the end, we settled on 1 topic only because this was the most written about, the social media topic. We also wanted to have enough length in the essays because lexical diversity measures are always very impacted by differential length and by 2 short essays. So we selected only essays that were 100 long, 100 words long or longer for both languages. And then we ended up with 66 essay pairs corresponding to high school graduates that were evenly divided into people who had graduated from Arabic medium of instruction high schools, which meant mostly public schools, and English medium of instruction high schools, which meant mostly private schools. And we also only selected female writers, again, because most of the essays were female, and therefore to do the stratified random sampling, we needed to just kind of stick with females. And so very briefly, this is kind of like my summary of the main findings that I want to highlight here for you. So just to make sure that everything is clear, we have 66 female college students, and they wrote on Arabic and on English for the same exact topic, the social media. And preliminarily, we were a little bit concerned about whether there would be some difference between the 33 who came from Arabic medium of instruction high schools and the 33 who came from English medium of instruction high schools. And therefore, we compared their CEFR scores, and we found that there were no differences in CEFR of Arabic for the two subgroups, but there was an effect of high school background for English. The EMI writers had a higher CEFR score overall. So this goes very well with the previous presentation. And we think it's an interesting and good finding to see that, as predicted, EMI leads to better English as a result once people graduate. But actually, it's quite nice that for Arabic, it doesn't seem to have a negative impact. And I know that there are discussions in certain geographies where Arabic is the first language, but there is a very robust presence of EMI in education. There is discussion and fear that Arabic may be deteriorating because of the pressure of English. At least in our subsample, we didn't see evidence of that. And Nizar also already mentioned it for the full sample as well. When we compared our 3 new vocabulary metrics with our criterion measures, we found that only total vocabulary was the best predictor of a more traditional lexical diversity measure, MTLDW, which stands for Measure of Textual Lexical Diversity Wraparound. This is a measure, it's too complicated to explain how it's calculated, but again, it's calculated automatically. And we did calculate it for both Arabic and English in the essays. So this represented a more traditional way of separately measuring lexical diversity in each language in isolation. And we thank Scott Jarvis because he gave us the Python script that he had developed for Arabic to calculate MTLDW. And we also used the CEFR proficiency scores for both languages as predictors. And as I say, total vocabulary was really what predicted the traditional lexical diversity measure. And there were no relationships that we could detect for our bilingual vocabulary measures and the CEFR proficiency measures. So there was no prediction of proficiency in either language based on our lexical diversity total conceptual or type vocabulary measures. So this was a little bit disappointing for the proficiency findings, but we could tell that there was a lot of truncated proficiency levels, a lot of preponderance of intermediate levels, B1, B2, just because of the nature of the data and because we could not stratify random sample for proficiency. So we decided on gender, only females, topic, only the social media, a balanced background from high school graduation. And at that point, we could not really choose anymore whether we would sample very equally from different proficiency levels. Either we could have taken Arabic or we could have taken English for a given writer, but it was just impossible. There weren't enough essays to do it that way. So in the end, probably in the future, we need a design that also can counterbalance and control for proficiency and have a good range of proficiencies. And we were pleased, though, that the total vocabulary strongly predicted traditional lexical diversity measures in both only Arabic or only English. And one reason why we were happy is that it's much less computationally intensive than the other two measures. So basically, it's an inventory of all the different lemma types that are found in both Arabic and English summed up. So anyone really can do it without much computational background, just with corpus linguistic background. And we also add that it's promising to be able to know that summing up the types of a writer's vocabulary across their languages can be a good, robust measure of lexical diversity, because I think it can also allow us as a tool to study translanguaging and plurilingual repertoires in writing better than if we always have to measure, as we have always done up until now, lexical diversity in one language at a time of the bilingual. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lourdes. That's great. Thanks. Okay, so we'll move on now to Mike. You're next, right? Shall I share my presentation?
Yes, please, David.
It's in there. Okay.
So, good evening, everybody. I will keep my presentation as short as possible. I won't go into too much depth, so we've got more time for discussion. So myself and my colleague, Dr. Ali Al-Sharif, we, similarly to Dr. Ortega, we looked at lexical matters, and we focused on lexical collocations across 2 proficiency levels within the corpus. Next slide, please. So as you all aware, I'm sure as you all are aware, formulaic language is a major component of written and spoken text in English, and it's also been identified as important in Arabic as well. It's also seen as a key component of lexical sophistication in academic writing. So the best writers often employ a range of different collocations. And also it's been identified, collocational competence has been identified as a key performance indicator of different proficiency levels. This was, I think, B2 and C1 level. So raters were able to distinguish differences there, statistically significant differences. So what we were interested in doing was to see whether there was any differences between languages and also proficiency levels. And we focused on 3 main types of lexical collocations: adjective noun, verb noun, and noun noun. Next slide, please. So there's various different dimensions of collocational competence that you could look at. We did measure all of these, but I think the most common that I looked at are number 4 and 5. So the number 4 is the frequency of collocations in a text. So the number of times a collocation appears in a corpus. That's one way to measure a collocation, whether it is a collocation or not. But then also you can apply it to another corpus or to text to see how frequent those collocations were in a student text. And the other measure that's frequently used is exclusivity of collocations, or in other words, the strength of the collocation. And for that, linguists have often used a mutual information score, but we actually used a log dice score, which has numerous benefits for comparing across languages. Next slide, please. So our main findings were when we were comparing languages. So if we're comparing Arabic B1 and Arabic B2, and between English B1 and English B2, there were few statistically significant differences between the texts. So I should have said earlier that what we did was we took a sample of 20 students who had produced texts in both English and Arabic, and they were rated at the same level. So, for example, you had some students whose Arabic texts were rated at B1, and they were also rated in English B1. So in that way, we could see we were comparing like with like, if you like, and the same with B2 as well. So we had a total of 20 students with texts in both English and Arabic. And similarly to Dr. Ortega, we only chose the texts that were written on social media as well to also ensure consistency. When we compared English with Arabic, we did find some differences. So number 2, for example, you can see the collocational frequency was different. So in Arabic, there was a higher proportion of less frequent collocational types overall. So when we added up all the different collocations, and particularly for adjective noun and verb noun at B1 level. So they used far fewer or less frequent collocations. You could say that means that their use of lexical collocations was more sophisticated when writing in Arabic, which perhaps isn't surprising if Arabic was more like their L1. The other finding was in terms of collocational exclusivity or collocational strength. So we did find in the English text there was a greater number and higher proportion of highly exclusive lexical collocations overall in the English text at both B1 and B2 proficiency levels, and also for all 3 syntactic categories of collocations. Next slide, please. Okay, go back, please. So yeah, so in looking at the literature, there wasn't very much really comparing collocations in English and Arabic. There was one study we found that said generally English collocational frequency was 3 times higher that of Arabic, which perhaps meets our findings in number 2. I think overall there was about a 2-to-1 relationship in our study, whereas in the literature it was 3-to-1. So that was quite similar, really. Obviously, limitations were the sample size was quite small, but we think this is quite interesting in terms of providing statistical evidence for differences between English and Arabic, written by the same bilingual students. And also, I think it shows that if you're comparing CEFR levels, there is no difference between B1 and B2 in terms of collocational competence, or statistically significant differences anyway. Whereas the literature said there was a difference between B2 and C1, but B1 and B2, there wasn't one. So that's me. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mike. And thanks to Ali as well for his contribution, although he's not here.
Yep.
Okay, great. Thanks. Great. So that's the vocabulary collocation, lexical collocation aspect. Now, we wanted the book to cover a range of levels of language. And so the next part is about discourse. So we have Dr. Besma, who is going to talk about meta-discourse and stance in the essays. Besma, do you want to stay with this? Do you want to share
I'll stay with you.
Stay with me.
No, I'll stay with you. It's okay. Right, thank you very much, David. So I'm moving, as David said, from the lexical approach to the corpus to a much more discourse approach to the corpus, because I'm investigating personal meta-discourse and stance. These are 2 rhetorical features of texts. So I'm investigating them in the book. Next slide. Yes, so the study investigates personal meta-discourse and stance in the book and compares them across the Arabic and English essays. The focus is on the use of first and second person pronouns. So I, me, my, you, your, and so on and so forth, and their Arabic equivalents. I'm going to start by just defining the 2 concepts that I'm focusing on, and then move to the rationale of my study. So personal meta-discourse refers to authorial presence, so the presence of the author in the text, and their engagement or involvement with readers. So examples of such features in the corpus is the following. So I have an English and an Arabic example. Now let me discuss this in terms of, so here me is personal meta-discourse. It reflects the presence of the author in the text, and the author here is actually organizing, okay, or shifting from one, okay, topic to the other. There is another equivalent example for Arabic. So هل لي أن أسألك أيضا كيف تحصل على الأخبار الجديدة? Here we have أسألك, which is here in bold. I ask you, okay? So here it's also another instance of personal meta-discourse where the writer intervenes in the text by the way of the personal pronoun, and is also involving the reader in the text. And here we have the use of the second person pronoun, which is you. The second concept that I've investigated in my chapter is the concept of stance, which in my approach is not considered as part of meta-discourse. So stance is or reflects the attitudes towards the topics, people, events, outside the realm of discourse. So something like, I believe that, okay, would reflect stance rather than meta-discourse, because here the writer is really describing or referring to something, outside the realm of discourse. I have another example here in Arabic. أنا أعتقد أنه من المستحيل التخلي نهائيا عن وسائل التواصل الاجتماعية. I believe that it is impossible to completely eliminate social media. So here it's the expression of stance by the author. Next slide, please. Yeah, so the rationale behind this study is that authorial presence, the expression of attitudes, so personal meta-discourse and stance, okay, and readers' engagement are rhetorical indicators of effective academic writing. So these are kind of features of effective academic writing that when they are used appropriately and strategically reflect good quality of writing. So that's the first rationale for the study. The second rationale is that exploring intra-learner rhetorical behavior has been an underexplored area in learner corpus research. So exploring the way one single learner behaves rhetorically in one language, and that same learner, the rhetorical behavior of that same learner in another language, so bilingual learners. L2 learners of English with Arabic as their L1 still remain under-researched in learner corpus research. So we do have relatively lots of studies of L2 learners of English with other language backgrounds than Arabic. However, for Arabic, it's still something that needs to be researched. And most perhaps importantly also in this study or in this chapter, we are investigating novice students, which is also an underrepresented population in research. Most of the time what we do is really investigating the rhetorical behavior of advanced learners or advanced students rather than under freshmen or novice students. Next slide. Now, very briefly, the method has been the following. So first of all, there was an automatic extraction of all first and second pronoun references in Zeybuk, both for Arabic and English, of course. And then there was a manual annotation to determine various features. So the first thing that needed to be determined is meta-discursivity and stance. So whether the pronoun refers to personal meta-discourse, whether it refers to stance, or there are pronouns that do not they are not meta-discursive, they do not reflect stance, and therefore they were discarded from the study. Also, manual annotation was implemented to determine the meta-discursive function. So yes, the pronoun is meta-discursive, but what does it do actually? Does it introduce a topic? Does it mark importance? Does it appeal to the reader? So doing that was also a manual work. Reflecting also the interpersonal dimension. So is the meta-discursive pronoun organizing. So does it serve to organize? Okay, so for example, now let me discuss this. Okay, that's something that the writer is using to organize discourse. Is it involving? So involving the reader in the text. Okay, can I ask you to do this, for example? Evaluative, is the writer using that meta discourse in order to evaluate something in the text, something like an important point that I would like to draw your attention to is, or is it bidimensional, like encompassing two or more of those dimensions in a single, let's say, linguistic realization. Then something else that was also annotated is the linguistic realization of meta discourse and stance. So how was that expressed linguistically? So that was a very extensive and functionally oriented manual annotation. Then what happened in this annotation, I mean, I determined the frequency of meta discourse, the frequency of stance markers, the frequency of functions, comparing them also across different languages. Then in addition to frequency, there were comparisons in terms of frequency, but also in terms of the use of those two rhetorical features, personal meta discourse and stance, per the school language variables. So, so comparing that between learners from two different school language backgrounds, two different medium of education. Next slide, please. So here are the main findings of the study. So the first major finding is that stance was much more frequent than personal meta discourse in Zeeburg. The participants in the study did not seem to avoid self-mentions, so there was a lot of the use of I in those essays. There was a dominance of organizing and evaluative meta discourse, which is typical of argumentative writing. Okay, so it's not really surprising, but it reflects the argumentative writing as a subgenre, as a text type. What is interesting is that there was a higher frequency of personal meta discourse in Arabic than in English essays, which compared to other research, for example, by Highland or Alotaibi, is different. So in those studies, we find more meta discourse in English than in Arabic. Also, the frequency here is higher in Arabic texts of students from Arabic medium schools. So that was even much more interesting. So not only were students using more meta discourse in Arabic texts, but those students coming from an Arabic medium school were using that rhetorical feature more in their Arabic texts. There is a higher proportion of organizing meta discourse in both texts by students, so in English and Arabic. But the higher proportion was coming from students from Arabic medium schools, rather than students coming from an English medium school. So more meta discourse, organizing meta discourse from Arabic medium school than English medium schools. However, in the whole corpus, there was a limited linguistic realization of personal meta discourse and stance. So the way meta discourse and stance were realized in Arabic and English texts lacked really variety. There were not a lot of diversity in the realization of these two rhetorical features in Arabic and in English. Next slide. Now, what are the different implications of these findings? The first thing is that students with Arabic as their L1 are, first of all, aware of personal meta discourse as a rhetorical device to organize texts. And that's something that differs from what we generally read in the literature, that they are not aware of that, or that they are not using meta discourse in their English writing. So that perhaps reflects an instance of backward transfer from the L2 to the L1. So it really reflects the influence of English on their Arabic performance. There are also instances of positive transfer from Arabic to English, especially when it comes to the expression of stance. So these students were using a lot of I in order to express their stance towards entities outside the real, outside discourse, so entities in the real world. Now, the implications of all these findings might be as follows. We might, first of all, exploit these different types of transfer, so backward transfer and positive transfer, in writing classes as communication strategies. So we want students to preserve their authorial voice and further develop their engagement of readers they write throughout their academic studies at university. So we can say that Arab students or students with an L1 Arabic do have this authorial voice. This should be kept or perhaps further developed across their studies at university. There is another implication, which is the prominence of backward transfer, so transfer from English into Arabic, which reflects a growing influence of English in the Emirates context. Another pedagogical implication is that academic writing instruction needs to develop a variety of linguistic resources for the expression of stance and personal meta-discourse, since one major finding of the study was that those students didn't have a variety of linguistic resources to express those rhetorical features. And finally, writing instructors should maintain the undergraduate's tendency to overtly express stance. So we should be careful not to really say to them, do not use I, and not expressing stance. We should also preserve this capacity to engage with readers using their authorial persona. However, what writing instructors might be doing is to fine-tune these abilities by explicit instruction on hedging, on the use, for example, of those linguistic or the expression of stance in strategic places in the academic writing, different academic writings by the students, rather than saying, well, no, do not use I in academic writing, adopt more an objective or neutral tone when writing. So we might, instructors, rather than, just stopping students from using these features, they should perhaps go and fine-tune these communicative resources that are already available in those bilinguals in order to fine-tune them in their academic writing. And I think that that's it for my part, David. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Beth. Thank you. Okay, so time has got on a bit, so I'm going to skip over the next slide, which is about, there's a chapter, again, looking at discourse, but looking at the use of metaphors by students in their English and their Arabic. So you're welcome to ask about this in a minute. We'll have questions, or read about it in the book. I just wanted to mention to wind up the presentation part that we're working on very soon releasing 2 extensions to Zaybook. One is some similar texts from 2nd and 3rd year students, and the other is a spoken corpus of students speaking in Arabic and English in relation to their university majors, in a more formal and a more informal situation, so different kinds of speaking. So that will be coming soon. In fact, it's being presented by a group of us at a conference soon. And here's the URL for accessing the corpus if you'd like to get the corpus. I will just skip on to there, which is about the book, and then we have a bit of time left for questions. So if there are questions, comments, it would be great to hear from anybody in the audience.
Thanks, David. I think that was a very, very good presentation from everyone. Thank you. I actually learned quite a lot, and I've been following the comments here in the chat as well. So what I do think, I can see that someone's already got their hand raised. If we can maybe do that, if people can raise their hands, and then the presenters can maybe just say, answer them, and then we'll do it like that. So I see at the moment, and I'm sorry, I won't pronounce it correctly, but I should also maybe not try. Yeah, there we go. So if you want to go ahead and unmute and then ask your question.
Hi, this is Fajr. Thank you so much for allowing us the space to ask questions. I am affiliated with the College of Education at UAEU. I thought Dr. Oh my God, I'm so bad with names. Dr. Selwa. I thought Dr. Selwa's reference to MSA as students learned L1 as opposed to acquired L1 is quite refreshing. I closely research on the topic in relation to Kuwaiti Arabic as an L1 since I'm Kuwaiti. Another way to refer to MSA could be, I think, with referring to it as 1+, but I refer to it as an L1 in my own research for the same reasons mentioned by Dr. Selwa in her presentation. But my question to Dr. Selwa and everybody here, why do you think there is an overall timid attitude to not calling MSA an L2 in relevant research, especially research written by Arabs? Is it because of emotional reasons? Arabs are driven by emotion. When it comes to the Arabic language being, the language of the Quran? Or is it because admitting that MSA as an L2 would automatically mean that language varieties like Kuwaiti Arabic, a language rather than a dialect? So that's my question.
Thank you, Fajr. So if I understood your question correctly, you're asking why we don't label modern standard Arabic as L2.
Yes, like exactly, which I do in my own research. I refer to it as an L2, and I've heard a lot of feedback about that. There's a timid overall attitude towards calling it an L2, just because then you would automatically assume that Kuwaiti Arabic or Emirati Arabic is an L1 or a language rather than a dialect.
So
You're right.
I can attempt. Or Salwa, please go ahead.
No, you got it. No worries.
So I'll talk at it. I'll try to talk about it without any emotion, as you said. Obviously, you're referring to the diverse. I mean, when we talk about the emotion, just to separate it, the sense of Arab nationalism and then the importance of Islam, right? As kind of
pan-Arabism,
pan-Arabism and Islamism, both of them kind of affect this. I think one of the things about the idea of the L1 and L2 when it comes to Arabic is that the relationship between the so-called standard and the so-called dialect is not really a complete separate, linguistic structure that are completely independent. I mean, I'll refer to Ferguson's diglossia here and the fact that Arabs navigate quite regularly between the two different varieties, throughout the day, throughout their speech and mannerisms, right? That's kind of one aspect of it. The second aspect actually is that there are many different ways to talk about standard, the so-called standard Arabic, that actually are on a spectrum of distance from the dialect. So you talk to many different people, and I have never done this study carefully, but my impression of when people talk about what they consider to be true standard, as in ultimately, you have all of your case endings properly, you conjugate completely, you do all of this work, in the standard form, as opposed to something in between. And there's a lot of in between, right? If you pick that extreme end, you may be right. Like, it may be in a linguistic space, from like morphology, lexicon, etc. You can imagine it being an L2 separate from a dialect. But in practice, the way Arabs speak, it's really not here nor there, and very, very few people actually reach that impossible maximum, right? It's also not a spoken language at home in that sense, right? I mean, but there's no place in the world where it is an actual daily language of use. So I would argue that the the whole idea of L1, L2 is not even applicable in the context of Arabic when you talk about the variety within Arabic because of its unique situation.
If I can add also from my perspective as an L2 Arabic specialist rather than Arabic as an L1, we have this arguments of this what we can debate in teaching students also Arabic as an L2, like why shouldn't we teach Ammiya? The Arabs themselves do not speak Fusha at home, or in society, why are we learning it? But my view to that is that building on what Nizar said, like Arabic, I look at it as a more of a plurilingual code where there are different varieties and different forms depending on the situation, on interlocutors, depending on many situations. And the way I look at it is that modern standard Arabic is like the academic language. So I don't see that we can express academically or academic ideas in Kuwaiti or Egyptian or Moroccan. So Arabic as a modern standard Arabic remains to be the academic language. If I liken it to English, even though the differences between modern standard English, standard English or academic English are not that huge, the differences as opposed to spoken English. But it exists in many other languages, Spanish, Chinese, etc. And as I said, I look at modern standard Arabic still as an L1, but it's the more academic language that the students, because students should be moving from the language of home to the language of society to an academic language. And for me, modern standard Arabic represents that, if this makes sense.
Thank you to both of you. Thank you so much.
I wonder if there might be, like, I don't know a lot about the situation in Scandinavia, but Swedish, Norwegian, and there are different varieties of Norwegian, and they're all very close to each other and intercomprehensible. But they always talk about them as separate languages.
I mean, that comes, of course, when you talk about a language, it's not just the grammar, the lexicon, and I mean, it's also the culture around it, the literature around it. I mean, all of these elements. And to add to what Salwa said, I mean, there's this aspect, if you think of the most normal way of using standard Arabic is in academic settings. You're talking about a relatively small number of the whole population, right? These like the tops of the pyramids of, let's say, of education across the Arab world. And those people want to talk with each other, communicate, historically have done that anyway, right? I mean, there's a long history of standard Arabic as the language of the academic, even as we know people spoke differently, in medieval periods, right, out at home, than they actually wrote. And we know this from the differences in the style of writings that, like compare Flerulele dialogues or, compared to how people would write treaties, for example. So this is not a new phenomena either. I think what's new, Fajr, is, and maybe this will turn slightly political, is this idea of, the pan-Arabist or Arab nationalism taken in a particular way that says standard Arabic has to become the language of daily life. So that idea is actually historically a relatively new idea. It's not an old idea, because even at the times of the Prophet, right, if you pick that as an important point in the development of the history of Arabic language, there was a clear recognition of differences in dialects, to the point that the Quran itself could be pronounced in multiple ways. So it's kind of something to really admire that 1,400 years ago, at the beginning of Islam, people accepted dialect differences to the point that the Holy Book could be pronounced in different ways. But today, you yell at a child for saying shubbak instead of saying nafida, even though not a single Arabic dialect that I know says the word nafida, right? There is something psychotic, sorry, I'll use that word carefully perhaps, or not so carefully, about this idea that we have to make everybody speak language and translate the cartoons into that form, etc. It's an experiment in my mind, Fajr, that's about 100 years old, basically, since the fall of the Ottoman Empire, and it has not succeeded exactly. Had they succeeded, we would all be across, speaking this standard form everywhere. But I don't think, I doubt that it will succeed. There's something about the full culture of Arab dialects that would have to be destroyed in the process of making standard Arabic a daily life forget Fairuz, forget Khartoum, destroy all of the jokes, because everything has to be replaced. But nobody's putting the effort to do it. So you have a language without a culture, you don't have a language, really. You have an idea of a language.
Right. Okay. So thanks, Nizar. Okay, so I don't know if anybody has a hand up. There's a question from Sakleen. Sakleen, would you like to go on mic and kind of expand on this a bit?
Am I audible to you?
Yes.
Yeah, this is Dr. Sakleen Asar. I'm from Pakistan. I have a PhD in corpus linguistics and a postdoctorate in sentiment analysis I have a PhD from Universidad de Navarra, Spain, and have a postdoc from Norwegian University of Science and Technology. Actually, I teach in Pakistan, and I work with multilingual people from different backgrounds. And as you said, you people are, as I listen to different presentations here. So don't you think it would be, let's say in future, not your book is already published now, it's in future, don't you think it would be interesting to see the influence of EMI or AMI on the speakers or the students who are not, whose L1 is not Arabic? Like, we can see the influence of EMI and AMI on them. Let's say in future, if you give a space to this sort of research, don't you think it would be feasible? This is my first question. The second question is, in your presentation, you said that one writer was writing something in English and another is in Arabic. So don't you think the translation, there will be a bit of biasness when somebody's translating the same text in the target language or in the source language? So how do you deal with these sort of issues when you're making corpora? Thank you.
Right. So so the first point about students from different language backgrounds. I mean, it's true that in the UAE, it's only 10% of the population who are the population that we're representing in this corpus. So Emiratis are a minority of the population. A lot of the rest are Arabic speaking from other Arab countries, maybe, but certainly maybe half the population is not Arabic speaking or more. So it could be interesting to look at them. I mean, we were really focusing on a particular discourse community, so the Emirati, bilingual Emiratis, really. But yeah, there would be different situation, I'm sure, with those other nationalities.
Thank you very much, David.
Yeah.
In future, we can collaborate. I'll share my CV with you.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else? Any other questions before we? I think we've run over time, actually.
I see there's one person in the chat who's wanting to ask a question. Yeah.
Oh, great.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for this wonderful presentation. I listened to all your talks and I found them really interesting. I'm an intruder, if you like, and thank you, Basma, for sending me the invitation to attend this wonderful talk. I am just curious to know a little bit more about how the whole process of evaluation of the essays took place, specifically referring to the Common European Framework of Reference and how the texts were evaluated as being A1 to C1 levels. And building on that, perhaps, is there a way after that to do the process in the reverse way, based on the findings of the different studies you've conducted on lexical density, the number of words, the collocations? Would it be possible to, read the text and see the scores again, and perhaps see whether the studies in a retrospective way can affect the final score of those texts. You know, just curious. I know this is perhaps something you haven't thought about, but just out of curiosity, and thank you so much.
Do you like me to say anything, David?
Please, yes, so you're the expert. Yeah.
Okay. The process was actually long for rating the students' work, and we had to do a lot of what do you call it? Norming.
Norming. Mm.
Yeah, to try to normalize, to try to reach as much agreement about what features we should look at. Because as I said earlier, if you remember, I said that the CFR is a descriptive scale. It focuses more on the adequacy rather than on accuracy. It doesn't deal with errors. So that was something, and in the literature there were some extreme opinions about when you use the CFR, don't look at the accuracy. And some that says, well, it is impossible. And from our own experience, it was impossible to rate a piece of work just on adequacy or fulfilling the task or the meaning. So we looked actually at the grammar, etc. So as I said, we did a lot of norming. I think we did about 40 samples. We got some training. David has kindly got us someone expert with the CFR who did some training for us as well, especially on English, but there was no such expertise in Arabic. And then we looked at, as I said, even though the descriptor is, the scale is more descriptive, but like what some of the opinions we read in the literature is that it's hard to say this text is adequate, communicatively adequate, if a lot of the grammar is wrong, if the structure is wrong. So we did, after the norming, we started like assessing the texts individually without getting together, without contacting each other, the three raters. And then we kind of we started to normalize also certain expressions, looking at for example, the grammar, at how they pass the meaning, the organization of the text. So we try to look at many aspects, not just the grammar, not just the meaning, but also the organization, the ability to develop ideas. And each of us filled a form on rating it. And then, as Nizar said, Nizar took over the process of changing these 6 CFR levels into numbers and calculating the average. So what you see at the end is the average. So one of us might have rated the text B2, someone have rated it B1, and someone has rated it A2. So maybe the text averages to B1. So I don't know if this answers your question, or if you were asking about something different what I said.
It was great, Salwa. Thank you so much. I know it's a really tough task rating and going through all of these details. You've done an amazing job. Thank you for the feedback.
I could add to Salwa, actually, there is one of the ongoing projects right now with some of our computer science students actually is to develop AI systems to try to simulate the process. So we're actually using the Zaybak data as a test data and tuning data to see how far we can do this task automatically. The results so far are not great, so we still need human intelligence. We're trying to see how far we can go with what we got, basically. But this is kind of another really exciting use, actually, which we didn't say anything about. But what we kept in mind in all of the annotations is that they could be used to help develop systems, for spelling and grammar correction and grading, etc.
One other thing.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, one other thing which is still, which has, I don't think was mentioned, was that each essay was looked at by 3 raters, and in every case, the 3 raters were 2 native speakers of Arabic with high-level English, so like Dr. Salwa, and then 1 native speaker of English with very high level of Arabic. So there was also a mix of assessors to try and get different perspectives on the level of the text.
And also, hello?
Yeah.
Hi.
Yeah. I just want to perhaps ask Nisreen if what you wanted to inquire about is whether perhaps it would be interesting to develop a kind of an academic writing taxonomy, like kind of things that make academic writing in particular successful or not, rather than...
You got my point, Basma.
Right, okay. Yeah, because it's something that I thought about at some point. I mean, I'm thinking about it right now. It's just because in my understanding, and I think Salwa can correct me if I'm wrong, that CFR is a general kind of an assessment of the English language. It's not designed to assess the academic writing proficiency of the students. There are, I mean, when reading the literature about academic writing, we find that there are different features like lexical collocations and lexical diversity, and then rhetorical features and meta discourse and stance and the way they are used effectively. So I was also wondering, Nisreen, these days, whether there is one taxonomy of academic writing that is available out there, and that lists all those features and that we can use to assess the academic writing of students at the university level. So maybe this is what you wanted to arrive at, like, okay, if we are searching all those different areas, lexical diversity, collocations, stance, personal meta discourse, why not just designing a kind of using them to design a kind of taxonomy to assess the academic writing of students that would be much more specific? That's what I understood from your question.
Well, actually, it can work this way because, as Salwa was explaining, the CFR is really tough to apply on real context, and evaluation is sometimes subjective because, as she said, there are no clear criteria that could be used to say this is definitely A1 or this is definitely B2. So there are so many intervening factors that affect the final score that a student or a piece of writing would get. And this is one thing. And as you said, this might apply to general language use or specific language use, as in academic writing. So up to now, as far as I know, and I know very little, I haven't come across any clear taxonomies or models that would say, well, if these features are present in a specific text, then this is a high level academic writing, or this is a lower one. There are comparable studies, and very often what is found in the literature is something where expert kinds of writing, generally the research article, the advanced or expert types of writing, are compared to those produced by student writing. So that can give an approximate idea about levels of academic writing, those that are advanced, but you can't really say for sure that because you've got more personal authorial voice in the text, then that means automatically this is a good piece of academic writing. It doesn't always work in such a clear way. So it's something really hard. I'm not even sure artificial intelligence can be helpful in that direction. So sorry for that.
If I could add, it's true, Nisreen and Basma, what you said about the CFR is generic, basically. It's context independent and language independent.
Sure.
To some extent, this is a good aspect of it. So it could be applied to any language. I don't know if you've heard about profiling studies, because this is more on the education, in language education. So there are profiling studies, like there is the famous English profile. And in many other languages, they started to do that as well. They are thinking of doing something for Arabic. And I think there is one already done by Saudi or something. Profiling studies start to define certain vocabulary that should exist in A1, certain vocabulary that should exist in A2, and so on to C1. And also grammar. So there's a vocabulary profile and there is a grammar profile. The English profile is free, and you can just search for it and go. But still, even with the help of these profiles, still the assessment using the CFR or something is meant to be, as I said, is still tricky. And through my readings, even with machine, there are studies that did, I don't know if that's what Nizar added that they are doing now. They label texts as well, not necessarily sentence. And I personally, I'm more inclined to texts rather than these profiling studies that specify a word or a piece of grammar. I'd rather look at a text. Yes, you will look at some individual features, phrases, certain connectors, certain vocabulary, but until now, as I said, even machines do not agree sometimes on leveling a text. Humans do not agree on leveling text. And I remember something I read, but I can't remember the author, about the machines cannot, for example, pick the rhetorics in Shakespeare's play, for example. This still needs a human person to be able to pick that. Also talking about academic texts, there is what we call input text and output text on the not machine level. I'm not good at this aspect. I can't talk about computational linguistics, but I'm talking again from educational point of view. An input text is a text we give to students, academic text. But when we expect from them an output, we do not exactly expect an output text at the same level as the academic input text that we gave. So I did an earlier study also where I labeled some, we could say, academic texts that the students are exposed to in textbooks. And obviously, the way you label this can be slightly different, or I don't know if this is the correct way to say it, but your expectations from students will be less in a way. So many aspects, many human and educational, pedagogic aspects actually interfere in the process of labeling. So I don't know if this adds to any of your questions, but I thought I'll clarify that from myself.
Thank you so much. Definitely, yeah, sure.
Thank you.
So if I can quickly just jump in here, sorry everyone. I think that we'll be wrapping up just now because we have been keeping people for quite some time. I did just post an email address in the chat and I will just repeat it again now. I'd like to invite anyone who still has a question to maybe just send it through to this email address, and then I can forward it to the authors and the editors, and they can sort of answer us, and then I'll be able to get back to you as quick as possible with an answer. So I'm going to post it in the chat again just now. But from ELINET's side, I would really like to thank everyone for being here today and for the very interesting presentation and everything that we have about the book. So if anyone has any other questions or suggestions or even just remarks, please feel free to email us and we'll forward it on. And Sarah, I don't know if you wanted to also just say one thing.
I just wanted to thank everyone involved. It was a really stimulating session with a great discussion and involvement from everyone. So thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, I noticed Lourdes had her hand up, and I wouldn't want to cut that off. Do you want to just?
No, I just wanted to say that this is yet another way of using the bilingual corpus that I hope you undertake very soon. It lends itself for an ideal study of what is good writing in English and in Arabic by the same writers. So who are good writers? Because writing ability transfers very heavily from one language to another, regardless of the linguistic resources that are deployed to be a good writer. So the bilingual corpus, I think, would be fantastic to do a study and developing from raters insights about what good writing or good writers are, bilingually speaking. And later on, a second step perhaps gets at Nesrin Tricky's suggestion. Once the raters have kind of developed a theory of what good writing is and good writers are bilingually in these two sets of essays, you can look back at the linguistic resources that they were deploying languages and sort of back engineer some linguistic profiling of it. I doubt that it will be a super great correspondence because there's a lot more into writing than linguistic resources. But it can be like a really great study. And there are so few corpora resources to do this kind of thing bilingually. So congratulations to David and Nizar also for creating such a fantastic resource. Yeah.
Well, thank you everybody for your contributions to the book and the talk, and yeah, hope to keep in touch. And the idea of this corpus is that it's a resource, so all of you, if you you know, feel free to go and download it and research with it, or put your PhD students onto it, or we look forward to seeing it used for different purposes. Thanks. Okay, so I know Nadia is probably wanting to go home. So
Thanks, everyone.
Let's wind up.